Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Secretary, for being here. I'd like to follow up on a question that my fellow senator from West Virginia talked about. You and I have talked about this, and that is trying to target the 21st Century Cures dollars to the tip of the spear where we have the highest age-adjusted mortality rate in the country. I just want to ask for a clarification, because my understanding was when we talked about this, and that the last tranche of money that went out on the old formula basis, but the next tranche of money that's coming out in September, October, will have this target adjusted. Could you kind of confirm that for me and maybe explain a little bit?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Senator. As I mentioned to Senator Manchin, we appreciate both. There's the targeted holdback from the omnibus of, I think, 15%, if I remember correctly, that is deliberately targeted to the highest burden states. But in addition, we appreciate the flexibility that Congress gave us now on the remainder of the money that we would put out in September to also, with regard to that money, try to focus it on the highest burden areas of the country. So I think on both sides of the fence there would be our goal to target where most needed in the country.
Well, I think that makes a lot of sense, and to those of us in states who are not as highly affected as our states are at the very beginning, if we don't nip this in the bud where we are and find best practices, unfortunately, I think it's going to cascade in the numbers that we see in our area. Another area of concern that I have, we see a lot of money going into this. We see a lot of recovery and treatment and a spectrum of solutions, and I welcome all of that, from drug courts to naloxone to medication-assisted treatment to help with foster families, et cetera, et cetera. I do have in the back of my mind a concern, and we've seen some news reports where recovery centers have sort of sprouted up without the proper oversight as to what type of treatment's being optioned, what kind of recovery programs. In some cases, I believe there was a case where in the treatment program, the person who was in charge of that or the owner of it was actually giving the users more drugs to keep them sort of at bay. So I don't know where your quality control is on this. Is it more at the state? Is it your level? And what you all are doing about that?
So I'm glad you raised that. It's a really important question, and that's something that even on the last round of funding that went out, the $495 million that went out just a couple of weeks ago, SAMHSA with Dr. Ellie McCants imposed conditions there, for instance, that the money could only go to treatment centers that use medication-assisted therapy, okay? Because we know that works, and it ought to be available if the precious money that the Congress has allocated is being spent there. We're going to keep looking as we move forward to September, again, on best practices, best approaches. We want to be collaborative, but we also want to make sure this money doesn't just get spent any which way, but goes towards the real approaches that are going to work to help solve this problem. So exactly the kind of situation you're talking about. Learning process for us, primarily state regulation, but we, of course, through the grant process, as we release the money, can impose conditions on that, on how that should be spent. And as we learn, get input from you and others, what's working and not working, and where there are risks of abuse, we want to take advantage of the opportunity.
I welcome that. I would also say our local West Virginia, we have Recovery Place, and we also have Ray of Hope that are abstinence treatment, and they have some success here, and a lot of success. So I think as we just need a quality reassurance that we're not getting pop-ups around to solve a very deep and devastating problem. The other area of concern for me and health, and it's such a large area in general, is the Alzheimer's and what we're doing in terms of treatment, research, helping caregivers, palliative care, all the things. I was personally touched by this in my own family, as many of us are. So from the department's perspective, I know you're doing research. I know you're kind of Medicare's trying to help with some of these issues. What perspective can you bring to us today?
Well, of course, we've got a comprehensive and deep commitment around Alzheimer's, just as you do. At NIH, with the money that this committee fortunately allocates to us, I think we're currently supporting over 140 clinical trials. in that space. It's an area I happen to be quite familiar with also.
Right.
We need to keep looking in the Medicare and Medicaid space to see ways that, again, my theme of not being penny wise, pound foolish, are there ways that we can support caregivers and others in non-traditional ways, I think, to ensure that we avoid perhaps early institutionalization of individuals.
Right.
And so I'm open for whatever any ideas and best approaches that we can take across the board, in addition to our research support, also on our payment side, how we can help the families who are dealing with this devastating disease.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr.